My name is Sarah Whitfield. I'm 30 years old from Austin, Texas. I teach high school English, and if you asked anyone about me, they'd probably say I'm too forgiving, too soft, always trying to please people who don't deserve it. That flaw, it almost broke me, but in the end, it became the reason my parents lost everything they thought they owned. On my wedding day, in front of everyone I loved, my parents mocked me. Not strangers, not enemies, my own mother and father. They whispered behind their champagne glasses. They sneered at my flowers, my dress, my vows. And just before I walked down the aisle, I heard it clear as day. This whole thing is an embarrassment. Their words cut deeper than the tightest shoes, sharper than any veil pin. But here's what they didn't know: I had a secret, a plan, and by the time it was over, they were the ones humiliated. Stories like mine are real. And if you want to hear more, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next story, pause, you won't want to miss it. And now, I want to ask you something. Which state are you watching this from? Are you in Texas like me? Or California, Florida, New York, maybe somewhere else across the US? Drop your state in the comments. I'll be reading. I grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than love. My father was a businessman who measured life in dollar signs. My mother was a social climber, chasing gossip and garden parties like they were oxygen. And then there was my sister Julia, the golden child. Straight A's, Ivy League, now a lawyer in Dallas. To them, she was perfect. To them, I was disappointing. A teacher? They scoffed. Sweet, my mother would say, smiling tight, but don't you want something more impressive? I laughed it off, swallowed the ache, and told myself maybe one day I'd prove them wrong. When I met Daniel, my fiancé, I thought that day had come. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He was a carpenter, steady hands, kind eyes, a heart that knew how to build more than houses. But to my parents, he was beneath us. At tea family dinners, my father ignored him. My mother whispered, "A carpenter? Really, Sarah?" Even Julia smirked. Across the table, Daniel just squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "We don't need their approval." I believed him, but deep down, I still longed for them to love me, to accept me. The morning of my wedding, Daniel's family bustled around me, fixing flowers, braiding hair, laughing. Their warmth wrapped around me like sunlight. But my family? Cold faces, tight lips. My mother muttered, "This looks cheap." My father sighed, "This isn't a wedding. It's a mistake." And then, just before the doors opened, I heard it. My mother's voice, sharp and smug. What an embarrassment. The words sank into me like poison. I walked down that aisle, with tears burning behind my eyes, smiling for the crowd but broken inside. But what they didn't realize was that the girl they thought was too soft, too quiet, too forgiving, had been keeping something to herself, something powerful enough to ruin them. And on the night of my wedding, I finally decided to set it free. That night, after the vows faded and the guests went home, I sat in silence. My new husband slept peacefully, but my mind raced because I couldn't stop hearing their voices. Cheap, mistake, embarrassment, and the sickest part, they said it like it was the truth, like I was the joke, and they were untouchable. But deep down, I knew something they didn't, something I had buried years ago. I was 16 the first time I caught a glimpse of my father's business. It was late, the house dark. I wandered downstairs for a glass of water. When I saw his office door cracked open, he sat there, phone pressed to his ear, papers scattered across his desk. I froze when I heard him hiss, "No, you keep quiet. The money's moving like we planned." I remember the numbers scribbled on the pages. Accounts, transfers, signatures. At the time, they meant nothing to me, but I never forgot them. Years later, while working as a secretary at a law office during college, I learned what those numbers meant. Shell companies, fraud, hidden accounts, and my mother? She wasn't innocent either. Once, I saw her slip an envelope into a stranger's hand at the country club. She told me it was a charity donation, but I knew bribe money when I saw it. I didn't say a word, because who would have believed me? Julia, my golden sister, she worshipped them. The neighbors, they admired them, and me? I was Sarah, the disappointment, the quiet one, the one no one listened to. So I stayed silent. I convinced myself it was easier that way until my wedding day, until their sneers and whispers snapped something inside me. When I got home from the wedding, still in my dress, I dug into the back of my closet. There, hidden inside an old showbox, were the scraps I had collected over the years. A copy of one of my father's signed checks, strange, routed through an offshore bank. A photo I'd snapped of my mother handing off that envelope at the club. Receipts, notes, a paper trail no one knew I had. My hands trembled as I spread them across the bed. For the first time, I saw the shape of it. Their empire wasn't built on pride. It was built on fraud, and if I played this right, I could bring it crashing down. There was one person I thought might help me. Someone who had been chewed up and spat out by my parents years ago, my Aunt Margaret. She had cut ties with the family after a business falling out. My parents always called her bitter, unstable, but I remembered her tears the night she left. And now I wondered, what had she really known? So I called her. My voice shaking, I said, "Aunt Margaret, it's Sarah. Can we meet?" There was a long pause on the line, then a sigh. I wondered when this day would come. She said quietly, "We met at a diner on the edge of Austin, the kind of place where no one asks questions." Margaret looked older, worn down, but her eyes were sharp. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were contracts, bank statements, and signatures that made my blood run cold. She leaned close and whispered, "You want to ruin them, Sarah? This is where you start." My fingers tightened on the folder, and in that moment, I knew the plan was no longer just an idea. It had begun. The folder felt heavier than it should have. Not just paper. Weight, history, secrets. When I opened it that night, sitting cross-legged on my bed, I felt my stomach twist. Inside were contracts, bank records, and emails printed out from years ago. Some bore my father's signature. Others showed transfers from charity funds into accounts that didn't exist on paper. One page was even worse. It wasn't just his handwriting. It was my mother's too. Her name signed beside his, approving transactions that siphon money away from actual charities into their own shell accounts. I whispered into the empty room, "Oh my God." When we met again the next day, I asked Margaret why she kept these files. Her lips thinned as she stirred her coffee. "Because I was the one who helped them. I kept the books, Sarah. For years, I was the one who moved the money. When I started asking questions, they forced me out, said I was unstable, that I had a drinking problem." Her eyes burned into mine. "They ruined me so no one would believe me. But I knew one day, someone would come looking. And here you are." I swallowed hard. "And if I use this, if I expose them, Margaret's voice was calm but final. Then you burn the kingdom to the ground. For days, I carried the folder in my bag, too scared to look at it again. I still taught my classes, graded essays, smiled at my students, but inside, my heart never stopped pounding because I knew what this meant. If I leaked it and got caught, my family would destroy me. But if I stayed quiet, they would keep destroying others. Every time I remembered my mother's voice on my wedding day, what an embarrassment, my fear burned into anger. Late one night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I opened my laptop. I created a new email. Anonymous. No name, no trace. I typed a subject line with trembling fingers. Johnson Family Financial Crimes Documents attached. I attached 3 files from Margaret's folder. Not all, just enough to get attention. Then, I sent it to a journalist known in Austin for chasing corruption stories. When I clicked send, my chest tightened like I'd jumped off a cliff. 2 weeks later, the article appeared. Not a headline, not front page. A quiet piece buried on the 3rd page of the local news site. Questions arise about Whitfield family charitable accounts. It was small, subtle, but in this town, even a whisper can echo. At church that Sunday, I saw the shift. People still smiled at my parents, but their eyes flicked toward each other. Whispers floated behind pews. Fraud? You know, there've always been rumors. My parents smiled through it, but I noticed the way my father's jaw clenched, the way my mother gripped her handbag tighter than usual. That night, my sister Julia called me. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. You've seen the news, right? Some idiots trying to smear mom and dad. I forced my voice steady. Yeah, crazy, huh? There was a pause. Then Julia's tone darkened. You don't think someone close could have done this, do you? My throat went dry. I lied, softly. Of course not. But as I hung up the phone, my hands shook because for the first time, they had reason to be afraid. And for the first time, they were looking for an enemy. The first article was just a whisper. But whispers, when repeated, become rumors. And rumors can devour an entire family. I didn't wait long. The first piece had landed. Now it was time to strike harder. I chose 3 more documents from Margaret's folder, ones that couldn't be brushed aside as jealous lies, a contract with my father's signature tied directly to a shell account in the Caymans, a receipt showing funds drained from a charity gala, and an email thread printed and dated between my mother and a consultant arranging payoffs. That night, I attached them to another anonymous email. This time, the subject line was sharper. Proof of Whitfield family fraud. I hesitated only a second, then pressed send. 3 days later, it hit the front page. Local businessman tied to offshore accounts and charity fraud. There were photos of documents, screenshots of emails. The journalists hadn't named their source, but the evidence spoke for itself, and suddenly, the town that had worshipped my parents began to recoil. The grocery store, I overheard, always knew something was off with them. To think we donated to that gala. The admiration that once surrounded them had soured into suspicion. 2 weeks later, my parents still tried to maintain appearances. They hosted a fundraiser at the downtown hotel ballroom. Champagne, crystal chandeliers, glittering dresses, the image of control. I stood in the back with Ethan unnoticed. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. My father took the stage, smiling stiffly. My family has always valued integrity, community, and trust, but his voice caught on trust. The room shifted. A man at the front whispered too loudly, "Integrity?" From him, laughter rippled through the tables. The sound hit my father like a slap. My mother's smile faltered. Her pearls gleamed under the chandelier, but her face had gone pale. I felt my chest tighten not with fear, with power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being laughed at. That night, Julia stormed into my apartment. Her heels clicked angrily on my hardwood floor. "Do you realize what this is doing to us?" she demanded, eyes blazing. "People at my firm are whispering. Clients are pulling out. You're humiliating us." I looked at her calmly. "Funny, that's exactly what you said about me on my wedding day." Her jaw dropped, stunned, and I shut the door in her face. Later that week, a car pulled into my driveway. My parents stepped out, both of them pale, furious. My father's voice thundered as he stormed inside. You're behind this, aren't you?" I froze, my heart hammering, because though I had planned for this moment, nothing could prepare me for the raw fury in his eyes, and my mother's trembling voice followed, desperate. "Hannah, if you don't stop this, we'll all lose everything." Her words cracked the air, and in that moment, I realized they were finally afraid of me. When predators are cornered, they don't surrender, they thrash, and my parents were thrashing now. A week after the second article exploded, they called a press conference on the church lawn. Reporters gathered, microphones raised, cameras flashing. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, hidden behind sunglasses, heart pounding in my chest. My father stood at the podium, his voice loud to loud. "Our family has been slandered by vicious lies. We have always stood for integrity, for charity, for this community." His hand trembled as he slammed the podium. My mother stood stiffly beside him, her pearl necklace glinting in the sun. But her smile was brittle, the corners of her mouth twitching. Then a reporter shouted from the back, "Mr. Whitfield, do you deny the signatures on the offshore contracts? We have copies." The crowd fell silent. My father's mouth opened, closed. For a heartbeat, he froze, then he forced a laugh. "Fabrications, all fabrications." But I saw it, that flicker of panic in his eyes, and I knew the crowd saw it too. That night, the whispers turned into open talk. At the grocery store, two women shook their heads. "At the church, did you see?" He couldn't even answer. "Integrity, my foot. They've been stealing for years." Invitations dried up overnight. The luncheons, the golf outings, the parties, they vanished. Even the pastor released a statement about holding leaders accountable. The Whitfield name, once untouchable, was cracking. 3 nights later, a knock rattled my apartment door. When I opened it, my parents stood there, not proud, not powerful, but desperate. My father pushed inside, voice low and furious. You're behind this. Don't deny it." My mother's eyes glistened as she reached for me. "Sarah, please. If you don't stop, we'll lose everything. The house, the company, our name." I looked at her hand trembling in the air between us, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt nothing. "Maybe you should have thought about that," I said softly, "before you mocked me in front of everyone I loved." For a moment, silence. Then I saw the first crack of fear in their eyes. Not at the articles, not at the whispers, at me, because the daughter they dismissed, the daughter they mocked, the daughter they called an embarrassment, was the one who had power now. As they left, I watched from the window. My father's stride wasn't strong anymore. It was uneven, broken. My mother clutched his arm like she was drowning, but I also saw something else in his face before he turned away. Not just fear, rage, and desperate people with nothing left are the most dangerous kind. The night my parents came pounding at my door, I barely slept. Their faces red with fury, pale with fear lingered in my mind, but beneath their rage, I saw something new, a crack, a weakness, and that was exactly what I needed. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. "Aunt Margaret?" I whispered. Her voice was firm. "Sarah, we need to meet again. There's more you need to see." We met at the same diner, tucked in the corner booth. Her hands were steadier this time, her eyes sharper. She slid another folder across the table, thicker than the last. Charity fraud, forged contracts, payoffs to city officials, all with Robert and Diane's names on them. I flipped through the pages, my breath catching. Signatures, dates, bank transfers. This wasn't gossip. This was a blueprint of their empire rotting from the inside. Margaret leaned closer. "You have enough to bury them, but you need to be careful. Once you strike again, they'll know it's you." I swallowed hard. "I think they already suspect." Her expression didn't change. "Then you have to finish it before they finish you." That night, I spread the papers across my kitchen table. The evidence was undeniable, but my chest tightened with fear. What if they retaliated? What if they found a way to drag me down with them? I pressed my palms flat against the table, whispering to myself, "They've controlled you your whole life. This is your chance to end it." And for the first time, I believed it. I bought a small fireproof lockbox and slid it under the bed. Inside, I placed copies of everything: my box, Margaret's files, the new folder. Then I scanned them, stored them in an anonymous cloud account, emailed them to myself under hidden addresses. And no matter what they tried, the truth couldn't be erased. And when the time came, I would drop it like a bomb. The next week, another article hit. This one detailed suspicious donations routed through my mother's social club. People began to whisper openly. At the coffee shop, a woman muttered, "I can't believe I ever trusted Diane with our charity fund." At school, even one of my students asked, "Miss Whitfield, are you related to those Whitfields?" I smiled tightly. Yes, and nothing more. One evening, as I filed away the new copies, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the journalist I'd been feeding. The subject line read, "We need more. One piece to make this undeniable." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, because I knew exactly what he was asking for. The one document my father thought no one had ever seen. The one signature that could tie every crime directly to him. And I had it. The journalist's email stared back at me. "We need more. One piece to make this undeniable." My hands shook over the keyboard, because I knew exactly which piece he meant. Years ago, before I left for college, I'd stumbled across a folder in my father's office. Inside was a contract city development funds routed through his company. At the bottom, his signature, and beside it, my mother's. I had snapped a photo with my old flip phone. Back then, I didn't know what it meant, but now I did. This wasn't just shady. This was fraud tied to government money. I pulled the photo up from an old backup drive, my breath catching. The grainy image glowed on my screen, proof of the empire's rot. I hesitated for one long moment, because I knew, once I pressed send, there would be no going back, no forgiveness, no undoing. I whispered to myself, "They called you an embarrassment. Let them taste their own shame. Then I attached the file, pressed send, and felt the weight of years lift off my chest. 3 days later, it wasn't just a local story anymore. It hit the regional news. Whitfield family tied to federal fund misuse. The article cited contracts, signatures, offshore accounts, and payouts. Every lie they'd built their kingdom on exposed. The whispers became shouts. Neighbors stopped, waving. Business partners cut ties. The community that once praised them now pointed and shook their heads. That night, Julia stormed into my apartment again. Her face was pale, her eyes wild. "You're behind this, aren't you?" she demanded. I forced my voice calm. "What makes you think that?" Her lips trembled. "Because no one else hates them enough to do this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She stormed out, slamming the door. At church, the pastor avoided them. At the country club, people whispered openly. At the grocery store, they stood alone in the aisle, clutching their cart while others turned away. The perfect Whitfield family, no longer welcome. And then, the headline I'd been waiting for. Federal investigation opened into Whitfield family businesses. It was no longer rumor, no longer gossip. It was law. Agents swarmed their offices. Boxes of documents were carried out in broad daylight. Photos splashed across every news site in Texas. And my parents? Their faces were plastered under the word fraud. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea, a knock echoed at my door. I froze. Because I knew it wasn't Julia. It wasn't Margaret. It was them. My father's voice cut through the wood, low and furious. "Sarah, open this door. We need to talk." My blood ran cold. Because the predators weren't just wounded now. They were cornered, and a cornered predator is the most dangerous kind. The pounding on my door grew louder. My father's voice thundered. "Sarah, open this door right now." My mother's softer tone followed, shaky but sharp. "Sweetheart, please. We can fix this, but we need to talk." My hands trembled on the doorknob. For years, they had dictated every moment of my life, and now here they were, begging and demanding at once. I opened the door. They looked smaller somehow. My father's suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. My mother's perfect makeup had smeared, pearls hanging loose. Around her neck, he shoved his way inside, voice a hiss. "You think you're clever? You think you can destroy us?" I stood still, silent. My mother reached for my arm, her hand trembling. "Sarah, please. Don't let them take us down. Think about your sister." About family. The word family made my chest tighten. I almost laughed. "Family," I whispered. "Where was family when you mocked me at my own wedding? When you called me an embarrassment in front of everyone I loved?" Their faces froze. For once, they didn't have a script. My father stepped closer, towering over me like he always had. But this time, I didn't flinch. His voice was low, dangerous. "You'll regret this. You'll go down with us." I lifted my chin, my voice calm. "No, I have copies. I have witnesses. If anything happens to me, everything goes straight to the feds." His jaw tightened. My mother gasped softly. They both realized it at the same time. The control they once had over me was gone. For a moment, the rage slipped, and I saw it. Fear. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, please. We'll lose everything. The house, the business, our reputation." I stared at her, steady. "You already lost them. You just haven't admitted it yet." My father slammed his fist on the table. "You ungrateful girl. We gave you everything." My voice rose, trembling but fierce. You gave me nothing but shame, nothing but silence, nothing but humiliation. The words echoed through the apartment, sharp and final. They recoiled as if struck. My father's voice cracked as he pointed a finger at me. This isn't over. We will not go down like this. My mother's sobs filled the silence as they turned to leave. The door slammed shut behind them. But there, words lingered because I knew. Desperate people don't just fade quietly, they thrash. And I had just pushed them into the corner. The knock never came again. Not from them, but from the law. 2 weeks later, I saw it with my own eyes. Black SUVs pulled into the long Whitfield driveway. Federal agents spilled out, jackets marked in bold yellow. FBI neighbors stood at their fences, whispering. Phones recorded every moment. I parked 2 streets away, watching from a distance. Agents carried out boxes of files, computers, binders. The life they had built document by document was now evidence. And then came the moment I'll never forget. My parents, Robert and Diane Whitfield, were let out in handcuffs. My mother's pearls dangled against the chain link of the cuffs. My father's tie hung loose, his eyes wild as cameras flashed. The community that once applauded them now stared in disgust. By evening, the photos were everywhere. Front pages, evening news, social media. Whitfield couple arrested on fraud and embezzlement charges. Prominent family faces federal indictment. The kingdom they had built was ashes, and the whole world was watching it burn. Julia left me a voicemail. Her voice was shaking, furious. You've destroyed them, Sarah. You've destroyed all of us. Are you happy now? I listened once, then deleted it, because the truth was, I hadn't destroyed them. They destroyed themselves. I just pulled away the curtain. I went to the arraignment, not because I had to, but because I needed to see it. They shuffled into the courtroom in matching orange jumpsuits. No designer suits, no polished smiles, just 2 aging people who had spent their lives chasing power. Now powerless, my father scanned the room until his eyes met mine. For a second, I saw the old fire. Then it flickered out. My mother's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Maybe help me, maybe forgive me. But I sat still, unmoving. After the hearing, I walked outside into the Texas heat. Reporters swarmed, asking for comments. Neighbors stared, but no one asked me if I was an embarrassment. No. Now, the embarrassment had a new name. Whitfield. The trial was scheduled. The charges stacked higher with every passing day. Fraud, forgery, misuse of federal funds. They would face years, decades behind bars. And yet, a part of me knew this wasn't the ending. Not yet, because before the gavel fell, before the bars closed, I still had one more thing to say. Face to face, the trial was swift. The evidence stacked high, the lies too tangled to escape. Witnesses testified, bankers, former employees, even Aunt Margaret, her voice steady as she confirmed what she'd seen. And then the verdict came, guilty. On all counts. The last time I saw my parents face to face was in that courtroom. They stood, thinner now, hollow-eyed, their once proud shoulders hunched. The judge read their sentence, years behind bars, everything they owned seized. My father tried to smirk, but his lips trembled. His eyes started to mine, blazing with the same old rage. You'll regret this, he mouthed, but his words had no power anymore. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she whispered across the room, Sarah, please. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because in that moment, Silence was louder than anything I could have said. Afterward, I stepped out of the courthouse into the Texas sun. The air was heavy, hot, but for the first time in years, I could breathe. The cameras flashed around me, reporters shouting questions. I ignored them because this wasn't about headlines. This was about freedom. Sometimes I drive past their old mansion. The windows are dark, the yard overgrown. The house looks like a skeleton, an empty shell of what once was, and I think of my mother's voice on my wedding day, an embarrassment, but she was wrong. The embarrassment was never me. It was them. Revenge doesn't heal the scars. It doesn't give you back the years stolen, the love you never received. But it clears the air. It makes sure the people who caged you can never cage you again. I don't forgive them. I don't need to. Forgiveness is for those who still carry love, and all I carry now is freedom, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough.